Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks. I'm your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is my co-host, The Juice, Dave Sadler. On this week's show, we have a host of headlines to go over, along with a bunch of fights to recap. World Series of Fighting 15, Bellator 131, and UFC 180. And we will also pick the main card fights for UFC Fight Night Frankie Edgar against Swanson this Saturday from Austin, Texas. Once again, as I said, I'm your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is my co-host, The Juice, Dave Sadler. And how's it going, Juice?
Good. Cleaning up the house. You know, holidays are coming up. Selling some of my cards, making some money, watching some fights. I'm gonna go to some fights this weekend in Chicago. Won't be able to see the Frankie Edgar fight live, but hey, gotta pay them bills, you know.
For sure, and much like you, I've been buying and selling and trading. I don't know if the deal's still running, but for those of you who are in kind of the collecting of memorabilia and figures and whatnot, the website Walkoutwear, great website, especially for into figures, whether it's UFC or WWE, they have an eBay channel, eBay page, and I think they were running a sale on almost all their inventory on their eBay page. And that included not only figures, but they had some UFC official gloves, which, of course, as most of you know, Dave and I like getting autographs, and that's a cool thing to get autograph official UFC gloves. So I was able to get a pair of official UFC gloves for $37, which is about half off or a little more than that if you bought them, like, say, from the UFC store or most traditional outlets, say, like Amazon or MMA Warehouse or something like that. They usually run you about $60 a pair, not including shipping. So got a great deal on that. So if the sale's still running, definitely check out the Walkoutwear page on eBay. You might get some great deals. And I got a great deal on some figures as well in there. So definitely check that out. And speaking of memorabilia, I just got some great stuff from our friend AJ Hiller at MMASignaturesUSA.com. I'm not kidding you, like the largest selection of signed MMA stuff. I asked him if he had. I put out some like lower level guys who are not U.S. based. I'm thinking, he probably won't have it. And one of the names I threw out was Robert Whitaker. Obviously, lives and trains in Australia most of the year, right? He'd be pretty hard to autograph to get. He hasn't fought too many events over here in the United States. Lo and behold, AJ delivered. He had an 8x10 of Robert Whitaker. So he was able to hook me up with that, and I'll have that coming in. So just in case you were wondering, like, very rarely does he stumped that he doesn't have at least something of somebody.
Yeah, so he nails it.
So just in case you're wondering, and I'm sure he'll be getting more stuff coming in. So he's always getting new stuff. So anyways, check out the website, MMASignaturesUSA.com. Or speaking of eBay, he's always running great deals on his eBay page. It's AM Hiller on eBay. So another way to get some great eBay deals as well. So let's start with some headlines here, Dave. And, of course, we'll give a shout-out to our friends at VigilanteMMA.com. First headline we'll talk about here is The Ultimate Fighter. And we'll talk about the past episode. Two things, obviously. We have the fight to talk about as Beck Rawlings took on Tecia Torres, who came back with an injury to Justine Kish. And so she's back in the competition, and she took on she's still the number 3 seed. She took on the number 8 seed in Rawlings. Looking at this fight, Dave, very entertaining fight. I think out of the 8 preliminary or the opening round fights, this was probably the best back and forth. The one where it seemed like it could go either way. Honestly, I thought Beck won the first round. It seemed like her flurries were a little more often, seemed like she was landing more. That's not to say Tecia didn't get her shots in, but it seemed like Beck was kind of controlling that first round, I thought. And then round number 2, I think Tecia kind of figured out, all right, she's going to come forward at me fast, hard, a lot of strikes. But if I can kind of circle, counter weight, and then get re-engage, I can do some damage, maybe clinch her up, take her down as well if that's there. And that's exactly what she did. She kind of went back to, I think, what made her so successful in her Felice Herrig fight, her footwork and movement, and she used that more in round 2, and I thought she secured round number 2, but I thought a third round was coming. I was very surprised that a decision had been made after the 2. the judges all conferred that Tisha Torres was the winner, and she moves on to the quarterfinal round, defeating Rollins. And I guess, one, did you think it was the best fight of the season? Two, did you think we'd see a third round?
Yes, and yes. Thought it was the best fight of the season, and I was actually stunned that it didn't go to a third round. I thought that both rounds were pretty difficult to judge. I thought they were very close. I kind of wish the whole season would have been like this with just close fights. But to get the top 16, there's a little bit of a gap for those, for 1 and 16, 2 and 15. But I have a feeling starting tonight that things are going to start picking up because the quality is the cream is rising to the top, as they say. And I was genuinely shocked that it didn't go to a third round, and I was genuinely shocked that like Twitter and Facebook did not blow up after it didn't go to a third round.
Yeah, very surprising. Because, like I said, it was close. It's hard for me to say Tisha won that fight based on those 2 rounds. I think it's very difficult to get an accurate look at that full 10 minutes and say Tisha did better in that 10 minutes than Beck. I think a third round was needed. Both got significant shots, but hey, that's the decision that they made, and Tisha's going to move on to the quarterfinal round, where all the quarterfinals are set. So we'll see the number 1 seed, Carla Esparza. She will take on Tisha, the number 3 seed, in one quarterfinal, and then and I think it's on the same side of the bracket. That is the why is it escaping me here? Not the Rose, Joanne. The Penne and the Daly. That's on the same side of the bracket. That's 5 versus 4. Daly being the 5, Penne being the 4. Then the other side of the bracket, you have 7 and 2. Rose versus Joanne Calderwood. And then the bottom side of that bracket, you have Felice Herrig, the 6th seed, against the number 14 seed, Randa Marcos. And we'll be treated to that last one this week, Randa Marcos against Felice Herrig. And I think this is a really tough fight. I think it's a lot closer than a 6 and a 14. The difference to me will be if Felice can keep it standing. I think if she keeps it standing, her stand-up's leaps and bounds ahead of Randa's. I think that was very apparent in Randa's win over Tisha Torres. She did not win that fight because of her stand-up. She won it because she didn't give up, was able to get the takedown, and be active on top. But if Felice can stop the takedown, I'm not sure if Randa has the tools as of right now to beat Felice.
Yeah, this will be a good one to kick off the quarterfinals. I think between the two, I think Felice is more dangerous all around. She's more of a complete mixed martial artist, I believe. And it goes back to what we said once they set these up. I think Felice has I won't say easy, the least difficult path to get to that final out in Vegas. And, I know Dana is always about hype, but he says that the shows really start picking up starting this week. So, if anything, I hope to see at least a good fight now that we've got the top, the tip of the top, I guess. Randa definitely has a chance, but I think Felice is just a more well-rounded fighter in every aspect.
Right, and like I said, the tools right now, the tools she had when she had on the show, I'm sure her stand-up has gotten a lot better since she's been training with Darren and those guys at Michigan Top Team. You know what I mean? So Randa now, I would say her stand-up is probably pretty solid, but she wasn't training full-time yet with our good friends, Darren Cruikshank and Jason Fisher yet, who could definitely teach her something in the stand-up department. So that Randa would probably have a better chance against Felice, but just based on the skills that they had there in the house, it definitely favors Felice. All right, well, let's talk about a couple headlines that kind of spin out of the Ultimate Fighter first, let's talk about the coaching staff. Of course, Team Pettis, Anthony Pettis, he's the head coach, but all of his coaches come from Rufus the Duke Rufus camp there in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And
Yep.
I just found out this today. I don't know when he became a part owner, but Anthony Pettis actually has, I believe, a share ownership in Rufus Sport. So he's not just simply training there as a fighter. He's actually part of the ownership. Now, I don't think he probably does too much in terms of bringing in fighters and running classes and how to market Rufus Sport and all that. He's just simply helping bankroll and hoping he can get a little extra money on the side. And obviously, when he retires, he has something to fall back on. But anyways, a lot of former Rufus Sport coaches and fighters have come out against Duke, and especially over the death of, I believe his name was Munson. Is that?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
I think it was Ryan.
Yeah, and he was a kickboxer, and I have a article here from Luke Thomas of MMAfighting.com, and yeah, Munson was his name, and he ended up dying, and the police are looking into it, and the organization the fight was at, Dennis Munson Jr. Was his name, and he ended up dying, I think, as a result of a fight. And of course, not all the blame goes on Rufus Sport. There's also the organization that put on the fights, and stuff happens. It's not always someone's to blame for that, and that's the reason why this person's no longer with us. But I think that kind of spurred the big two that have been coming out against Duke is Eric Red Schaefer and Rose Namajunas. Also Pat Barry's, I think, thrown in his 2 cents, as well as some other former Rufus Sport coaches in there, basically saying the culture's not good. Duke has had a history of bullying some students to the point that they feel worthless, and they're out, they get beat up all the time. And there have been some fighters such as Ben Askren and Eric Koch rushing to Duke's defense, and obviously this is a bad situation, a guy dying, especially when it's connected to fighting, no matter what. And obviously that's not good for Rufus Sport in itself. But then all these people piling on, I'm not saying there's never problems at Rufus Sport. I think there's probably some people that don't have as good of experience as others. But for a camp that's been around for as long as it has, it's just crazy how all of a sudden all these allegations are coming out now, especially if you look at someone like Eric Schaefer, who hasn't been there in a couple of years. Why is it just now all these accusations coming out and not when these people left? So it takes someone dying for you to say if things weren't right or you didn't agree with things are running. I think that's poor timing by some of these people.
It may be poor timing, but let's be real. When Rose was training there, like, Pat Barry is the one who seems to be getting the most worked up about it. He's no longer in the UFC. Rose wanted to be in the UFC, and her speaking up. Duke Rufus has his connections with within the UFC, so that could have halted that. So that could be part of it. And Rose Namajunas 2 years ago, who cares what she has to say? She's 17. You know what I mean? Now she's one of the top 10 fighters in the world. She's 2 wins away from being a world champion. And, you hear these things about, like, Duke Rufus being a bully, and I read a couple of stories that there was a super heavyweight was training with a guy 150 pounds, and Rufus was like, "We don't go 50% here. You hit him." And the guy wouldn't do it, so then Rufus blasted this guy in the mouth. Well, we can always go back to Pettis never ever fighting for the belt, or never ever fighting for the UFC, period, because he's always seems to be injured. Is that because Rufus is going too hard? Is that because the culture? I mean, all these other champions are fighting time after time after time after time. I mean, Mighty Mouse, he defends his belt all the time. but Pettis can't seem to get in there more than once every 3 years. So maybe there's something to it. It's unfortunate that it has to come out after somebody died, but the fact is it's out there. And, if you're in the Midwest and you're thinking about going there, it's at least something that you have to be curious about.
It's definitely a very interesting story, and I always thought, from what I've seen and heard of Duke Roufus, he always seemed like a really nice guy. Again, I'm not in there on a daily basis. I'm not in there training. So, again, I have no basis, but I think that's what's so surprising. It's not like this guy comes across as a totalitarian, dictator or something like that. You know what I mean? He doesn't sound like he's a hard ass. You know what I mean? He doesn't come across that way. So to me, it is a little surprising. And speaking of Anthony Pettis, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, because he's part owner, he should share in some of the blame of this guy dying." And I'm like, he may be a part owner, but he probably wasn't even at the event that this went down. You know what I mean? The guy's a UFC champion. He's worrying about training, rehabbing, getting back in shape. Now, I don't think he has any. Now, again, he is associated with Rufus Sport, but I don't think he should be associated with the story of this gentleman dying. I think that's very unfair to him.
I think the event was put on by Duke Roufus. I think it was a Rufus Sport event, which is why people are kind of lumping him in. It would kind of be like if Vigilante MMA put on a show, we would be associated with it somewhat. I mean, I don't think I'm with you. I don't think Pettis was there. I don't think it's his fault. But it's a terrible situation. Mud's gonna get slung all over the place, and that's terrible. But honestly, Jim, bullying in an MMA gym, is that in a professional MMA gym? Is that something that's completely shocking to you with all the what's the right word here? With all the testosterone and I'm this guy, I'm so good, I'm Anthony Pettis, I'm Sergio Pettis. Is that really something that's shocking to people, that those guys would have a high opinion of themselves and that they're better than somebody else?
Well, those guys probably not, but for a coach to belittle his students, I think is a big issue. I don't think the Pettis brothers themselves are doing that, at least I hope not. But if you're the head coach, you're the one overseeing all the training and classes, and like you said, you're telling a 115-pound guy to fight a 216-pound guy, or you're going to selectively pick out one student to always kind of be the punching dummy, that's an issue.
Well, here's the other thing. A lot of it has to do with the coach, because if you go to MMA Team Genesis with our friend Doug Keast and a couple other guys that are listening all the time, it's currently a karate studio, and then Doug, they have the last couple of classes at the end of the night. They don't even let people cuss at the class until after 10 o'clock because it's a family place. You know what I mean? It's all about taking control of the situation that you're in. And, is it a big deal that people swear and say, "Oh, what the hell?" Is that really a big deal? No, probably not. But Doug sets a culture when you walk in there that you won't use that kind of language, because this is a family area, and there's there could be families walking through here. It's as simple as that.
Right, and again, we're not there on a daily basis. We don't know how much is true, how much is fabricated. I'm sure there's a hint of truth in all this. This cannot be all fabricated, but maybe a little bit is. I don't know. More information will probably come out as the story develops, and the death of Mr. Munson, Dave, according, again, I'm getting this from an MMA fighting article by Luke Thompson. Dennis Munson Jr., he was an amateur kickboxing student at Rufus Sport, and he died following an unsanctioned bout at an event that was promoted by Scott Joffe, who is Duke Rufus's business partner, and he's the second of the three owners, including Mr. Anthony Pettis himself. And according to he's quoting a report from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, which is the big paper there in Milwaukee. Munson died from a lack of proper regulatory oversight, which included a inattentive referee, only one ringside physician, and a host of other documented mistakes. The state declined to press charges against anyone for Munson's death, citing a lack of authority over unsanctioned kickboxing contest. So that is the situation surrounding him here. So obviously, the event might have been, co-promoted by Rufus Sport, but at the end of the day, the unsanctioned bouts and stuff still have to have state officials, state referees, and whatnot in some context. So that's not good, but there's definitely some blame there on Rufus Sport. They're not completely unscathed, but it's not their sole fault. But yeah.
It's a little bit disturbing that nobody's going to be held accountable for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard for us, because at the end of the day, his death wasn't like that Joffe. It's not like he killed this guy. There's a lot of different issues. It's hard to say, yeah, this person is going down for murder.
Right.
Now.
But could those people put on a kickboxing event tomorrow?
Probably shouldn't.
I mean,
I think that's probably more along the lines of what's going to happen, Dave. Maybe some type of ban on being the sole promoter of events, maybe some type of fine. You know what I mean? I don't think anyone's going to jail for the murder of this Mr. Munson.
I don't think anybody should go to jail, but I also don't think that I don't want to go to an event where somebody's going to die. Like, I
mean, again, this was an accident. It's not like he was meant to die. You know what I mean? That's the thing. It wasn't a attempted murder or homicide or anything like that.
I'm going to a show
this very unfortunate situation that happened to this man and his family.
I'm going to a show this weekend that I've been to probably 30 times. And the show normally gets kicked off about 8 o'clock, and we normally get there about 5:30. Usually Doug's got guys fighting on the card. It's a total fight challenge right outside of Chicago. Some big names have fought there. And when we get there between 5 and 5:30, the ambulance is always there at 5:30. And they're literally 6 feet from the cage. From the moment that guys start getting in the cage to warm up, there's 2 of them plus plus 2 doctors. So
that's an actual sanctioned event.
Right. And we're going off on a tangent, but that's what pisses me off. The guy who promotes that show he was in the Marine Corps a little bit ago, and it's about attention to detail. Are you trying to make $1 million by promoting these shows, or are you trying to better the sport? Because Joe Goitia, the guy who puts on Total Fight Challenge, he's promoting the sport, the safety of the sport, getting these guys to the next level. By not having doctors and the proper staff and all that at that event in Milwaukee, what are you trying to do?
Well, it shows that not just the state of Milwaukee, but states all across the country have to crack down on these so-called unsanctioned events. Because it's the fact that unsanctioned, like you said, they can get away with having one referee, one doctor, maybe the ambulance isn't on standby. You know what I mean? Because it's not sanctioned. The state is not putting their full support about it because it hasn't been documented with the state. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The state can't support something that isn't sanctioned. So the state has to crack down on these, because if this happens, more unsanctioned events, and let's just get this right, this was a kickboxing fight. This wasn't an MMA fight with 4-ounce gloves.
No.
You know what I mean? This guy, to me, would have been in a relatively safer environment. doing this. You add that in too. This is something all athletic commissions are going to have to look at and start saying, if your guys are not registered with the state and your event is not registered with the state, you're going to face some type of prosecution.
What would you say that the time is now for better licensing with these? See what I tried to do there?
Yeah.
That was terrible.
Yeah, no, that was good. No, absolutely. I think obviously Nevada has a lot of fights. They're pretty solid, but here in the Midwest, I think Ohio has a fantastic athletic commission. You go right to, I think it's like Ohio ABC or Ohio Athletic Commission, whatever it is, .gov or .org, and all their forms are right there. Event forms, promoter forms, fighter forms, doctor forms, referee forms, all right there. It shows you the schedule of all the events, who to contact to set up events. It's all right there in plain English. If you go to a state, maybe say like I haven't checked out Illinois, but I know Indiana and Michigan, theirs is pretty difficult to navigate. It's not as easy to set up an event in those two states, especially here in Michigan. And I hope that would change, because the easier it is for people to get access and get the right forms, that's more fights that can happen in your state. That's more money that can be made. It's good to have all that stuff being prepared. I don't know about Milwaukee and Wisconsin specifically, but if their system's anything like a couple of the states around here, I could see easily how those forms can really be not, what's the word I want to use, not used or misused, however you want to say it. But if you have a commission, say like Ohio, it seems like they got their stuff together. If you do something wrong in Ohio, they're going to know about it.
Yep.
Some of these other states, I bet the state, again, probably had no idea that event was going on. Now all of a sudden a guy dies, and they got to comment on this. So, yeah, I hope, it is always unfortunate that it takes a death or some type of tragedy to alert to problems within some type of corporation or state government body. All right. Well, speaking of the Ultimate Fighter, let's transition to that. Another, again, kind of off thing. Beck Rollins in this PAX episode, because she fought, they really focused on her backstory about how she had spousal abuse and she had to move out of that situation, take her kids to a different house. Now she's against bullying. She's joined some sort of anti-bullying nonprofit organization in Australia. And yet on the show, she has kind of somewhat been a bully to some of the members in the cast. And then we have a piece by MMAsucka.com that has come out getting Dan Hyatt, they're technically still married, Beck Rollins' estranged husband. He has come out saying he's never hit Beck. He's never hurt her or any of the kids. And he's the one that kind of found her. He was their first manager, kind of helped her bring up. And, now all this and the stuff's coming out about him, beating her up and stuff. And he's saying, hey, I don't expect you to believe me. There's been so much stuff saying, that I've been a bad guy, but, it's kind of hurt my reputation a bit. And, I'm trying to live my life the best I can. I have a new girlfriend, a new kid on the way. And, I'm trying to do my best to, keep promoting fights here in Australia. But, it just sucks that, now Beck is on this high stage and everyone's believing her. And, again, we don't know what's going on. We don't know the whole story. I'm sure there's some hint of truth in that. Hard to believe there wasn't any problems in their marriage. Maybe he did hit her. Maybe he didn't. But it is interesting. The interesting part that he brought up was kind of that bowling thing, because she does, for a person that's supposed to be an advocate for anti-bullying, she doesn't seem to be doing it on the show. I didn't realize that before, but that's something I think that organization in Australia has to take a look at. And I understand it's TV and it's edited and whatnot, but at the end of the day, if you're acting bad, saying bad words and whatnot, it's going to come across no matter what editing techniques you use.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's a slippery slope, because you definitely get people behind you when you start talking about stuff like that. But we don't know the details of the relationship with her ex-husband or husband or whatever you want to call him. Um, but yeah, it's definitely a slippery slope that you don't want to go down if you don't have to. And you know, there's a lot of people who deal with a lot of different things on a daily basis. Money issues, physical abuse, verbal abuse, 100 different things. There's probably somebody at your work, Jim, that's dealing with it, somebody at my work that's dealing with it. But at the end of the day, I mean, I know this sounds really brash and probably a little bit rude. I just want to see two people get into the cage and fight. That's why I'm tuning in. I'm sure there's other fighters in the UFC that are dealing with issues, and they have to deal with those issues in a private manner, because those are family issues that affect them in their personal lives. When I tune in to watch a UFC programming, I want to see the fights. I feel bad that they have those issues, but I want to see the fights.
And is this something, Dave, where I'm not saying people should share some of their backstory, but if you're trying to use even a slightly fabricated backstory to gain more support, to gain more fans, so to speak, to get more sponsorship and recognition, I think that is somewhat of an issue. I think that is something, again, I don't think you can crack down on that. That's a hard thing to police, but if you have problems, with your marriage and with your spouse, whether estranged or otherwise, you can talk about it a little bit, but you should handle that stuff behind closed doors, because whether it's true or not, it sounds like Mr. Hyatt has had a pretty rough go of it here the last couple of years, and you may have almost ran him out of a business and a career.
Yeah. For your 15 minutes that they're going to talk to you on the show, you ran this guy out of an entire career for that.
Again, we don't know the whole story, but as far as any reports, there's never been any arrest charges filed, completed, or approached to Mr. Hyatt in regards to any spousal or marriage abuse.
That is not shocking to not.
So, I don't know. Well, all right, let's get off of we got some negative issues, Dave. We had to get it out there because we got a comment on all the news, but let's get to the news as you kind of referenced earlier. The time is now. The UFC, as I think we talked about slightly last week, they had their the biggest press conference ever on Monday, where they unveiled their reward system. I think it already kind of had been somewhat leaked or hinted at. I think we talked about it a couple weeks ago, right?
UFCrewards.com.
So that officially launched on Monday. We also got the fact that the UFC will be doing 45 events next year, which I believe is a record, if I'm not mistaken. That'll be the most events they'll put out in 1 year. And they announced all the dates. They have not announced specific locations for these events, but it looks like Brazil will probably get somewhere between 5 and 7 events, including a pay-per-view. Canada will get 3 to 5 events. I'd imagine that probably would include the pay-per-view. I think they said close to 30 events should be here in the United States. They will make a return trip to Mexico City, and they will also try to do 2 to 3 shows in Asia and or Australia, and they will do 2 to 3 shows in England and or Ireland, and they may try to do 1 or 2 of those European shows somewhere else in Europe. I don't know if that's Sweden, but they also hinted at Poland or Russia for a possible show, and they may or may not return to the Middle East with Dubai. So that's kind of those 45 events there kind of have been announced. I think it's kind of neat that we know there's going to be a fight on this specific date. We can kind of look at the year breakdown there. The only thing, Dave, I thought was interesting is that I'm sure they probably have somewhat of a location there in mind, but looking in terms of the event breakdown, most of these are obviously going to be UFC Fight Nights, either on Fox Sports 1, the Fight Pass, and I believe there's going to be 4 Fox broadcast events. There will also be 13 pay-per-view events in there, and they're pretty much running all the normal like shows and weekends and stuff, but we're getting, this is almost, Dave, 1 a week, just about. There are going to be very few weeks where we're not going to see some type of UFC event. So my first question is, do you like having kind of this rollout? Maybe this is a new thing they'll do every year, roll out how many events they're going to have and when they'll take place. Do you like that? 2, do you like 45 events? Do you think there should be more? Do you think there should be less? Or do you like this amount? And 3, do you like kind of the proposed, I guess, breakdown of where they're going to go geographically?
Yeah, I'm actually, I feel like I'm in the minority here, but I'm actually a fan of everything. You know, I like knowing, at least you know when the pay-per-views are going to be. I think it's kind of cool to know, simply because I'll get my schedule next week for the entire next year, so I'll know what days I'm off that far ahead. And you know, if Ebersol calls and says, "Hey, I'm fighting this day," I already know if I'm off. So, you know, you know, 45 events, whatever the number was. I don't understand how, as this is unveiling on Twitter, that all these experts and all these whatever you want to call them are going crazy. That there's just too many events. I can't watch them all. Are you kidding me? Like, maybe if your website didn't fly you to every single event, you wouldn't get burned out on it. But baseball has 162 games in a season. There's 45 fights. They have to do that. There's 450 people on the roster. You know, everyone's going to say, "Oh, it's watered down." Yeah, how was that card in Australia? 11 of 11 on finishes. Every fight was awesome. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you might not know who they are, but if you put a little bit of research into the UFC and into the product, you'll find out who these people are. You'll find out who Darren Cruikshank is. You'll find out that Miles Jury was on The Ultimate Fighter, and now he's on the cusp of having a title shot. You know, you'll find out that, you know, Ryan Jimmo used to be the MFC world champ and all that kind of stuff. Put a little bit of effort into it, and you'll see that the guys that are on these Fight Pass cards are guys that you might have seen before at local shows that are getting their chance because there's 45 shows in a year. So I don't understand where the argument comes in that there's too much. Yeah, a UFC 190 might not have the same clout as trying to find a poster here. You know, it might not have, UFC 190 might not be you know, UFC 190 might not look the same as UFC 140. UFC 140 had Jones, Machida, Mir, Big Nog, Ortiz, Little Nog, Claude Patrick, Brian Ebersol, Mark Hominick, and the Korean Zombie. And, you know, there's other big names on the undercard. Costa Phillip, who's on there. You know, might not be loaded like that, but if you tune in, you're going to get rewarded with good fights. Concluded rant.
I think that the only thing I don't like, and this is when they have 2 events on the same day. That's the only thing I don't like. And there are enough days in the year that you can have one day and one the next day. That's the only thing. There doesn't need to be 2 events on the same day. And the reason I say that is because you're trying to promote each fight somewhat individually. It's kind of hard to promote 2 events if they're going on the same day. I don't get that. But other than that, I don't have a problem with it. I'm going to watch them all. Maybe it's a tad high. I don't know. We'll see. It depends. If we see the first, we get to April, Dave, and we've seen 10 fight nights by then, and we're kind of like, man, these fight nights haven't been good. Maybe we can make a case. But as of right now, I don't know. We kind of have to wait and see. Like I said, I do like the fact that they've announced all the weekends, and I hope that's a new trend. But we'll see.
It does look
goes off.
It looks like for the Fan Expo that they're doing a Saturday and a Sunday again.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we'll see what goes on and everything. But we'll see if 45 event works. Maybe they'll realize, man, that was a lot of events. We had a lot of moving parts. We had to do X amount of this. We had to sign this many more fighters. Maybe we'll scale it down. Maybe they think, oh, that was great. We were able to pull that off successfully. Maybe we'll do an event every week.
Yes.
I don't know. So we'll see. We'll see how that all works out. But I think this is a step to see whether the UFC will do something like that, one fight a week, or they'll scale it back. This year will be a big year for them, and to see if they can pull that off. All right, let's get into some fights now here, Dave. Bellator 131. Big event. In fact, Dave, it has so far here in 2014, it's the highest rated television non-pay-per-view MMA event of the year, with an average viewing of 1.8 million viewers, with its peak at 2 million. That's higher than any UFC card or any other Bellator card so far this year. So for people that said, they weren't going to watch it, it was going to be a train wreck, it did very well in the ratings. Now, looking at the actual fights, Dave, King Mo against Joe Vitapo, I mean, that was expected, taking the fight on short notice, up a weight class. King Mo dominated, ended up getting a third-round knockout, not very surprising. The fight that was surprising was Mike Richman against Nam Phan. Nam Phan, a very talented individual, always very exciting. Mike Richman's second fight at bantamweight knocks out a guy who I thought was a pretty solid UFC fighter in the first round with a nice left, straight left, and then he threw another right in there. He probably didn't need it, but he was already in the midst of throwing that left-right combination. Dropped Nam Phan out completely cold. And I know they already announced Warren Galvo, Dave, but, man, I think Mike Richman's ready for a teleshot at bantamweight. 2 straight first-round finishes over some tough competitors. I'm not sure if there's much more he needs. I'm not sure if there's much more he needs to do to get a shot at the belt.
No, Richmond's definitely made a case for himself. I thought he pretty much destroyed Nam Phan, and I didn't see that happening at all. Not at all.
And then we got a very entertaining bout between Joe Schilling and Melvin Manhoef. For those of you who didn't know, Joe Schilling only 1-3 MMA, but 17-7, I believe they said, in kickboxing. Won a Glory tournament, I believe, last year. So pretty accomplished kickboxer, much like Melvin Manhoef as well. And they put on a pretty entertaining bout. Manhoef, I thought, did a great job in the first round. And then in the second round, just got caught with a nice right there by Joe Schilling that just put Manhoef out cold in the second round. And as some of you know, I do post stuff on Reddit, and I suggested that maybe after this loss, Manhoef should consider retiring. 2-3 in his last 5. He's 38 years old. I don't see him winning a world title in Bellator or any other major organization. While exciting, he's been in a lot of wars. He's taken a lot of damage, and I don't think he's trying to drop down to 170. I don't see that happening. I just don't think there's that much more for Manhoef left. He'll probably fight again for Bellator, but I wouldn't be surprised if Manhoef only fights a couple more times.
Yeah. I don't think he's going to be challenging for a title anytime soon. Are his fights entertaining? Yes. Do they have a spot on some of these cards? Absolutely. Highlight reel knockouts always sell.
Again, a lot of people didn't like my comments, but I just think it's something that he should consider, because he's not getting any younger.
Nobody's getting any younger.
All right, in the co-main event, Will Brooks against Michael Chandler, and Michael Chandler, I'm going to parallel this to 180. Him and Jake Ellenberger, to me, remind me very similar. They're both guys, big, strong, stocky guys for their weight class. Guys that had great runs, but now find themselves both on 3-fight losing streaks. And it seems like their wrestling hasn't been there as much as it was in the past, and their stand-up game hasn't really evolved to the point where it has power, but it doesn't have as lot of skill and technique attached to it. And I think for Michael Chandler, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a guy that still seems very raw in the stand-up. And if the wrestling's not going his way, yeah, he has one-punch knockout power, but he's kind of just swinging wildly and not pacing himself, and that's kind of wearing him out. And in this fight, Will Brooks, he was the better stand-up fighter, and he was moving in and out. He was able to stop the takedown, and he picked Chandler apart until eventually a scramble on another failed takedown by Chandler led to a quick right hand by Will Brooks that just completely took Chandler out of the picture to the point where he was actually waving off the fight himself, saying that he didn't want more. And Brooks, he even said in the post-fight, I didn't want to be a jerk, but the referee was letting it go, so I hit him in the face, and finished it there in the clinch in the 4th round. And we'll also talk about this with Ellenberger, but this is a situation where I think both guys need to take like 6 months, like not even like book a fight, and just work on stand-up, footwork, head movement, in and out, proper striking technique. Because if they got to have some semblance of a striking game, and I think that's what Michael Chandler's missing. I mean, Michael Chandler's a great fighter. I mean, he was in that fight. It's not like he was getting completely dominated by Will Brooks. But at the end of the day, Will Brooks has learned to develop those stand-up skills. And Michael Chandler, it just seems like he doesn't have those. And to be an elite guy, you got to be able to be serviceable standing up. Even if that's not your greatest strength, you got to be able to fight there if that's where the fight is taking place. And it just doesn't seem like Michael Chandler has picked that up just yet.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. What is that, 3 in a row he's lost?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. I mean, it really is. And it kind of takes a little bit away from the victory for Will Brooks. Will Brooks has done nothing but impress. As he ran through the tournament, he's beat everybody that's been put in front of him. He got knocked out real quick against Sadawad back a couple years ago, but that's a real early knockout in the fight, and a lot of stuff's happened since then. But Will Brooks is definitely somebody that they can market, and definitely somebody talented to lead that division. And because of who Michael Chandler is and was, it kind of takes a little bit away, because it's such a fast fall for him. But good for the local boy, for the Chicago guy, Will Brooks.
Michael Chandler will be back. I mean, I think he's only 26 years old. He hasn't been, he's only been doing MMA for a few years, maybe 4 years now, maybe 5. So again, he's still learning some things, and obviously there's still things he has to work on. And I hope he can return back, because again, I think he's a very likable guy. He's a great fighter. He's an exciting fighter, but he has to tighten up that aspect of his game. And same thing with Ellenberger. We'll get to in a little bit. But let's get to the main event, the fight they were promoting. 2 UFC Hall of Famers, Tito Ortiz against Stephan Bonnar. The first round was good, Dave. I will say that. It was pretty decent. Both guys actually had energy in that round. They did not look like washed-up fighters close to their 40s. But about midway through round 2, both fighters seemed completely gassed. And it was kind of, I wouldn't say it was grueling, but it was definitely lackluster in that final 7 or 8 minutes. You could tell both guys were kind of running on fumes. It seemed like Ortiz had a couple of nice power counters, but Bonnar was the one kind of in the face, kind of with the long jab and stuff. But I think with the couple power counter shots Ortiz was able to get, and his takedowns, which he did land several of them, I think he definitely won the fight, and I was surprised it came down as a split decision with one judge giving Bonner 2 rounds. But it wasn't the worst fight I've ever seen. It wasn't the best fight I ever seen, but it probably was the worst fight of the main card that we saw. But overall, not maybe the train wreck that some thought it would be, and overall a pretty solid event. Just again, maybe just Bonner Ortiz shouldn't have been the headline. But other than that, I think Bellator put on a pretty worthwhile event here for their final shebang here of 2014.
Yeah, they should have stopped after Brooks and Chandler. This was awful. This was absolutely terrible. They paid Tito Ortiz $300,000 to act like a jackass inside of the Bellator cage. Stephan Bonner got $100,000. We all know how big of a fan I am of Brian Ebersol. Tito Ortiz and Stephan Bonner are UFC Hall of Famers. Okay? UFC Hall of Famers. Let that sink in for a second. Stephan Bonner walks into the Bellator Steel, and they flash a little thing up on the screen. Took a picture of it right here. I don't know if people can see it or not. The notable victories, right? And it says, in order, Keith Jardine, Krzysztof Sosinski, Brian Ebersol, and Kyle Kingsbury. That's who his notable victories are. Stephan Bonner's. Do you know when he beat Brian Ebersol? I'm going to tell you. Do you know?
2006.
He beat Brian Ebersol to go 1-0 in his career. In 2001.
Oh, 2001. Yeah.
And that's a notable victory for Stephan Bonner. This guy's a UFC Hall of Famer. Are you kidding me? He wouldn't even be in the Beyond the Cage Hall of Fame.
He wouldn't even be in the Hall of Very Good.
The Hall of All Right. Not even that. He wouldn't even be in the hallway that I clean with this Clorox disinfecting wipes. Like,
it's one of those things, Dave, where what his fight for Stephan Bonner did to the UFC and sport, was it not a huge impact? Did it not change the face of the sport and the organization? Absolutely it did. But to warrant that one 15-minute affair to saying you're up in the Mount Rushmore of our organization for these past little over 20 years, that's a lot. You know what I mean? That's a lot to say.
Yeah, I mean, I've met him, great guy, but I just shook my head, and then you got the Bellator announcers. They're like, this fight is living up to every thought that we thought we were going to have, all the pre-fight hype. Are you kidding me? This is two 40-year-old men sparring live on cable TV for the entire world to see. And then Ortiz starts acting like a jackass after the fight, throwing water on Bonner, flipping him off, just, being a complete...
And they paid $400,000 for that.
I mean, they're amazed that they got such great numbers. But look you gave away a pay-per-view on TV, and you put two huge names in there to, tickle each other for 15 minutes.
And no wonder we hear Rampage now saying he wants to come back to the UFC because he heard Tito made $300,000. He's like, I didn't get $300,000, and Rampage is at least still good. You know what I mean? Like, a Rampage now would have destroyed Ortiz or Bonner in that fight. No doubt in my mind.
Yep.
Now, again, would Rampage be as competitive in the UFC against some of those guys? Probably not. But to come back, retire, have one more fight, maybe patch some things up, maybe get in the UFC Hall of Fame, because I think he would be deserving of that, having unified the pride in UFC titles, having defended it successfully, having, kind of ended the downfall of their biggest star in Chuck Liddell. You're right. I think it's kind of hard not to put him in. If he can come back, honestly, the fight that everyone was talking about with him was Shogun, a rematch with Shogun. Right. I think that'd be a nice fight for both them. Maybe not Shogun retire, maybe, but a nice fight, win or lose for Rampage to kind of end, his career with one more big fight in the UFC, and then he can go on, making movies or whatever he wants to do after that. But we'll see.
hey, I sent that screenshot to Brian when I saw it on TV, and he responded with LOL.
Yeah. And also, let's add in the fact, Stephan Bonnar, I don't know how much he weighed at the time, but Stephan Bonner's always been a pretty big light heavyweight. I mean, we're talking about a guy that's like 6'3", 6'4", probably weighs 230, 235. And,
Right?
Brian's what, 6 foot, maybe 185?
Yeah. I mean,
You know what I mean? He had 50 pounds on Brian. Yeah.
and in 2001, it wasn't like they had real strict weigh-ins and stuff.
Yeah. So, all right. Real quickly, Bellator announced some of their events during this fight, which included 4 title fights. We got Pitbull versus Strauss for the featherweight title. We will also have Douglas Lima against Paul Daly. Emmanuel Newton will take on Liam McGarry. That will be both at the same event on February 27th. And, of course, the already aforementioned Joe Warren against Marcus Galvo. I agree with all these, Dave. Paul Daly's had some problems with visa issues and domestic problems and criminal allegations in his native England that has kind of prevented him from being in Bellator. But all that situation has been figured out, so now he's back in Bellator. And nice test for Douglas Lima. We're talking about a guy that was on the cusp of a UFC title shot just a few years ago. So this is a big fight and a legit guy for Douglas Lima to take on. I like Strauss against Pitbull. I think that was a pretty obvious choice. But, again, I know Mike Richmond was in there, but I'm really surprised Marcus Galvo is getting a shot here at Joe Warren. Galvo did not impress me in his most recent Bellator fight. Yeah, and the fact Richmond's been on a roll. Honestly, Dave, I think they could have run a rematch, Warren-Dantes 2. I think Rafael Silva could have been put in there. Remember he had that very close fight on a week notice and almost beat Joe Warren? That would have been a nice one. I'm not sure how Marcus Galvo kind of gets this shot here. Other than that, I like that. I like the British invasion kind of card there in February. They're throwing in Sokaju and Bobby Lashley. Linton Vassell, who just fought Emmanuel Newton. He looks like a promising guy as well. So everything but the Galvo decision. I like kind of they're doing their mini unveiling here of their first couple of fights.
Yeah, the mini unveiling was cool. The one I want is Lima and Daly. I can't wait to see that. Daly's got sick hands. Lima's got sick kicks. Those kicks if those kicks start working early, that can do wonders to get, if Daly can't plant on those feet and throw punches, that completely affects his game plan. But on the other hand, if Daly can come out on the other side, that proves a lot of haters wrong. Why they keep putting Lashley on these cards, I have no idea. If it's warm inside the casino, he could probably pass out. And another thing too, you can tell that the old regime is gone and the new regime has come in. The next live event for Bellator is in 58 days, 6 hours, and 50 minutes. When's the last time that happened?
Yeah, and it's good. I think we kind of saw a little bit with the stage and a little bit of the different kind of entrance thing at 131, and I think that's what we're going to see for the future. I think, again, 2015 is when we're going to see, to me, Scott Coker's Bellator.
Yep.
We're really going to see that put to pasture, and I think in these next 58 days, they're going to try to go out and try to get as many men and women as they can, and like I think he said, try to book a solid 16 kind of 17 events next year and make Bellator 1 or 2 events a month to kind of be relevant, and I think take them in I think a great direction.
Hold on 1 second. Do you know who @Talk MMA is? Do you follow that person on Twitter?
Yeah, I know who he is.
Is he anybody? Does he have a podcast or anything? Do you know?
I thought he did some. He was in connection with our friends. We'll give them a shout out here. One of our affiliates, MMA-freak.com. You can follow them on Twitter @MMA Freakout. I kind of got following him and talking with a little bit in connection with those guys from MMA Freak, but I don't think he specifically does anything with them or whatnot. I think he's somewhat a media member, but I don't know his official outlet.
All right. Well, I'm going to read this. This is from this guy's Twitter. I don't know, but if it happens, hey, we were on the forefront. It says, a source tells me that Viacom and Spike TV reached out to Relativity Media, which has 17 to 20 billion in equity, for purchase of Bellator. The sale price that was offered is not disclosed. However, the meeting took place within the last months. 131's numbers were big for them. As a further read, my messages, it seems as if Viacom and Spike TV offered Relativity Media a sale price close to 80 million for Bellator.
Wow, that's... I hate to say that's, like, not a lot, but, like, if you're looking to, like... All right, what's the, like... I think maybe the NHL is probably like the lowest cost to own a professional sports team, right? If I'm not mistaken, like per average.
Probably.
That's going to run you still what, 400 million?
Yes.
It maybe a little more, and I'm even talking about like a bad team. You know, I'm talking about like the not the Hurricanes. They've been halfway decent. Anyways, a bad team in the NHL, maybe $400 million, and you're just gonna like part of a league, Dave. You're gonna get the whole league for $80 million.
Right.
If I had $80 million, I would say that's a pretty good deal. to be quite honest. Now, I don't know if what to me this shows is that Viacom doesn't want to own and produce Bellator. I think that's what it means. I think they want to show Bellator on their network, but they don't want to overextend themselves, you know, running the organization as well. And so by selling it to Relative Media, they also get the backing of a pretty good production company as well that can also help, you know, kind of co-fund events. So that way Viacom's not putting all this money into this organization. I think that's part of the reason with the sell, but I don't think that means that Bellator won't be on Spike TV anymore.
Right. Well,
because I'm sure part of the contract would include TV rights, right? I mean, that's probably some type of, you know, they're not just going to sell it and go, well, now it's off our network.
Well, yeah, one would assume. If it happens, at least I noticed it on Twitter right away, and we were on the forefront. If not, it wasn't my fault.
All right, well, let's get to World Series of Fighting 15, which I guess what you could say was the clear third-place card. First fight, though, Dave, what a great fight between Georgie Patino and Eric Reynolds, who used to fight in the XFC, boy. I tell you what, that may be the bloodiest MMA fight I've ever seen. Or one, it's up there, man. I mean, both guys were bleeding over each other, throwing combinations, taking each other down, and just what a great performance by Patino. You know, a guy towards the end of his career taking on a kind of an up-and-comer in Eric Reynolds, and was able to go in there and get a hard-fought, bloody, unanimous decision victory. Then we saw Jessica Aguilar defend her title against Kalinja Faria. From what we've seen of Aguilar's opponents so far in the World Series of Fighting, really most of them have not been up to snuff. I think Faria so far was the toughest test Aguilar's had to deal with, but the only thing that Faria lacked in, I think, was a little confidence. I think she was giving Aguilar too much respect, and by the time the fight got into the championship rounds, Dave, you know, she was already behind 3 rounds on the scorecard. You did see a noticeable turn up in her aggression and striking in that 4th and 5th round, and I think had she fought that way the whole fight, she might have made this a lot closer fight than what it was, because she was the much taller and rangier fighter, and I think had she gotten Aguilar's face a little more, I don't know if she would have knocked her out, but she would at least made it a lot more competitive. And I wouldn't be surprised if Faria fights Aguilar again while she's still under her World Series of Fighting contract.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about Faria, that you know, even when Aguilar was walking into the cage, she was just smiling and laughing, and it's a world title shot. Against like the number one female in your weight division right now. And she was just like smiling and being all giddy about it. Like, there's plenty of time for that, but you need to get your game face on and respect the lady that's across from you. But yeah, we got to get Jessica Aguilar in the UFC.
Well, it goes back, Dave. Remember, I think it was over a year ago we said, why is Jessica Aguilar signing with the World Series of Fighting? She should have signed with Invicta, where she would have been taking on the best girls. Now, that signing with Invicta would have automatically put her on the Ultimate Fighter.
Yep.
So this is the decision that now she's looking back at and like, man, I should have taken less money to go to Invicta instead of making a little more money to fight cans for World Series of Fighting.
Yep.
I mean, there are... man, now I don't know how long her World Series of Fighting contract lasts for, but I guarantee as soon as that's done, she's going to the UFC. Like,
yeah,
there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
But then, excuse me. But then once she does get to the UFC, she's going to have a record full of beating nobody. So then she's going to have to prove herself in the UFC, and that's just taking miles off the vehicle.
Well, regardless, though, she was going to have to fight somebody before a title shot.
Right.
So, anyways, all right. Justin Gaethje, Melvin Guillard. Melvin Guillard misses weight.
Shocker.
Makes it a non-title fight. A 3-round fight instead of 5. You think maybe then, because of Guillard, maybe he'd be mad, maybe he'd be angry with a chip on his shoulder. Maybe come out, maybe have a good performance that he did not. I guess you can make a case for him winning the first round, but Justin Gaethje, every guy World Series of Fighting has put in front of him, he has just destroyed. This kid is incredible, Dave. I mean, Melvin Guillard was a top 15, at the very least the top 20 lightweight in the UFC, and beat a lot of tough guys and fought a lot of the tough guys. And Justin Gaethje made him look like a guy that wasn't even top 40. You know what I mean? Like, Justin Gaethje looked incredible. And man, when you think about the next level, it's, again, another guy I think once his contract's over, he's going to be in the UFC. This guy is exciting, and people think pretty much we've just seen his stand-up. But this guy was a Division One All-American wrestler, and he hasn't even really showcased those skills, Dave, other than takedown defense. Kind of like a Chuck Liddell style, where he's sprawling and brawling, and it's working for him, man, and he's exciting.
Yeah. Our buddy David, DK, he just tweeted me. He told me to stop yawning. Sorry, I work terrible hours. I apologize. He just hit me up on Twitter. This is another one of those cases with Gaethje. It's kind of like what I said about Will Brooks. Melvin Guillard's got the the hype behind him, and oh, it's Melvin Guillard. I'm going to start finishing fools. Comes in like 30 pounds overweight, just kind of a jerk about it. And all anybody wants to talk about is how Guillard is, Guillard missed weight. Guillard said before this fight that, like, he's an A-list fighter in a B-list promotion. No, you're a C-list fighter in a B-list promotion. Him missing weight takes a lot away from Justin Gaethje. This is supposed to be, for the belt, and Gaethje went out there like a professional. He took the fight to Melvin Guillard, and walked out victorious. I hope World Series of Fighting tells Melvin to go away, and I hope the next time we see Melvin fight, he's in a local fairground somewhere.
The main event was Yushin Okami against David Branch. This wasn't a great fight. I mean, you had two guys primarily with grappling backgrounds, a jiu-jitsu black belt for David Branch, and then, of course, more known for his wrestling and clinch work there in Yushin Okami. But we were kind of treated to basically kind of a boxing match for almost 20 minutes, and It was technical. I think there were some good shots exchanged, Dave, but there wasn't a frequency of shots. There wasn't a lot of output from either gentleman, and that's what kind of made it boring. It wasn't the fact that not bad technique was being shown or damage wasn't done. It's just there wasn't enough of it. And eventually, there in the fourth round, David Branch caught Okami with just a straight right and was able to drop him, landed more on the ground, and got the finish at 339. And again, not the most exciting fight, very technical, but for David Branch, a guy that a couple years ago, Dave, was out of the UFC, had gotten beaten badly a couple times. Now all of a sudden, he's beaten a top 10 guy in Yushin Okami. He's finished a couple of guys here. David Branch has made a complete turnaround in his career, and now arguably he's on the cusp of becoming a top 10 guy in the world in this division.
Yeah. Dana, you've heard Dana said it a lot, that just because you get cut in the UFC doesn't mean that you're off their radar. It just means that right now they need you to go outside of the promotion, get some quality victories, kind of pad your resume, and we'll think about bringing you back. They brought people back, lots of people back. And, David, when you get cut, you can do one of two things with it. You can, I got cut, I can't be successful anywhere. Or you can do what David Branch did and go out, get victories, earn titles, main event cards, where people are watching you, and, MMA fans can start to know who you are. So when you do get that call that says that you're going to fill in on a UFC card, people know who you are. There's a little bit of a following. There's a little bit of a buzz when you get there. And I feel like David Branch is doing that.
All right. I got to bring this up because it's in connection with World Series of Fighting, and it's a similar headline. And I actually got it direct from the XFC themselves. They actually sent me this press release. Now, for those of you who didn't know, Callan Fondria, who just fought for the World Series of Fighting strawweight title against Aguilar, just so people know, the XFC actually has an exclusive contract with Faria, which the XFC provided to the World Series of Fighting. And this is, again, the official press release from the XFC. Notwithstanding the clear terms of Ms. Faria's exclusive contract with the XFC, World Series of Fighting has made it clear it intends to proceed with Faria's bout planned for this weekend, of course, which happened and did. There is no question that the XFC has a valid contract with Faria, and that her fighting in the World Series of Fighting this weekend violates the XFC's rights under that contract. As a consequence of the World Series of Fighting, the XFC will be filing a lawsuit against the World Series of Fighting in the United States District Court of Tampa, Florida, and the XFC is seeking to enforce its right to the fullest extent of the law. Now, that's obviously something that was not said by the announcers on the World Series of Fighting broadcast, but if you're World Series of Fighting and Faria has a contract with another organization, you either A, can't promote her, or B, you have to buy out said contract from the XFC to allow her to fight under your card. And also a third point, the fight's in Florida. How does the state of Florida, sanction this bout knowing that she is technically can't be contracted by the World Series of Fighting? A lot of interesting things here, and this once again goes to state oversight. The state of Florida missed something here with this whole contract thing, and how this fight even was still allowed to happen, I have no idea. And the XFC has every right to sue the World Series of Fighting, and to me, will win in court. If it doesn't get settled outside, but you know what I mean.
Well, no, I mean, if that's true. The XFC can say they can say whatever they want, that she's under contract, but Jim, if we managed a fighter and the World Series of Fighting came to us with a contract, no matter what, if we had a contract with somebody else, I feel like most managers are going to be like, hey, I got a contract with such and such. So to me, it may be a little. She was an XFC fighter. They kind of had an understanding that she was an XFC fighter, but World Series of Fighting put money in front of her, and there wasn't anything actually in front of her. Um, you know, it's a legal process. It's going to play out, but it seems like it could have worked out for both parties had they had it been like a loan type thing. Like, hey, XFC's #1 strawweight is going to go fight World Series of Fighting's #1 strawweight. Seems like that could have benefited everybody.
That's what I mean. There had to be. That's what the XFC is saying, that they missed out on an opportunity to make money. That's the big deal, because, like I said, if you have an exclusive contract with someone to fight in your organization, it probably says that she cannot fight for another organization unless bought out by that competing organization. And obviously, the World Series of Fighting did not buy out that contract. So they avoided paying that amount to get her out of that contract. Which, again, if the World Series of Fighting is like, all right, hey, we'll pay you $50,000 to get her out of that contract so we can sign her, I guarantee the World Series or XFC would have been like, fine by us.
Right.
But when you say, hey, you need to buy her out or something so that way you guys can promote her, and then they don't, and then that fight happens anyway, you probably got a problem. But it's an issue that a lot of people probably don't know about surrounding this event, but I wanted to bring and shed some light to it. That and it kind of adds, and this is not the first time we've heard World Series of Fighting doing shady dealings with fighters and not paying them and all that stuff, so it really doesn't surprise me that they pulled something like this.
We'll see how it plays out. We will see.
All right, well, let's get to UFC 180, Dave, the big pay-per-view, the first ever UFC fight in Mexico. Very exciting night of fights, Dave, as we were able to see 8 finishes out of 11 fights. Very impressive night of fights. And, of course, we got to give a shout-out to our friend who we interviewed just before this fight, Jessica I. What a dominating performance she put on against Leslie Smith, completely busting her ear, splitting it open. And that led to the doctor stoppage there in the second round at the 130 marker, as Herb Dean saw that, that's not good. Don't get me wrong, Leslie Smith, she tried her best and definitely a warrior, but she just got dominated. I mean, looking at these total numbers, Dave, she got outstruck 84-29. In the 8 minutes that this fight went, and just couldn't really get close to Jessica. Was just getting completely outpointed and just pretty much hit with every exchange.
Yeah, it seemed like Jessica was just a little crisper, a little faster than Leslie. I tend to agree with what Leslie was saying going into the second, that it was only 3 minutes in, but it seemed like Leslie was starting to get a little more comfortable as the second round started. I don't know, altitude, nerves, whatever it was, but that's actually a fight that I wouldn't mind seeing again. I mean, yeah, it's a dominant victory for I, but it's all... Anytime there's a doctor stoppage for whatever the reason, there's always a
what if,
like a cloud over it. I mean, Chris Weidman beat Anderson Silva via doctor stoppage, and he still can't live it down. Like, it's not his fault Anderson's leg broke. It's not Jessica's fault that Leslie's ear tried to fall off. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing this fight go back. Obviously, Leslie needs to win some, and Jessica might actually have to lose one, but to me, this was set up to be a good fight.
And real quickly, they already announced Miesha Tate against Sarah McMahon coming up next year. Do you like Jessica against the winner of that, or I was thinking possibly a Betch Kohea as well as a possible next opponent?
Well, Betch Correia and Jessica would make a little bit of sense because I think Betch is waiting for a fight. Because otherwise Jessica has to sit and wait for the Misha fight to be done.
So, all right, cool. Then maybe we'll see that come to fruition. Well, let's get to the main card here, Dave. First fight of the evening: Hector Urbina against Edgar Garcia in the welterweight division, and I thought Urbina looked a lot better at welterweight than he did at middleweight on the show. I think it suited him a little better, and this fight was Hector Urbina really trying for the takedown there. Garcia kind of stopped the first one early, but then the second time around, Urbina was able to go in there and lock in a guillotine choke after he was very close earlier in the fight. The second time around, and kind of on that second takedown attempt, was able to lock it up there. And credit for Urbina for kind of sticking with that submission. He saw that it looked like Garcia was going to put his neck out there, and didn't get the first time, but locked it up that second time.
Yeah, I was happy with from Jessica up through this next fight. I was happy with all the performances because I told you I didn't remember Urbina that much. I didn't remember Urbina, Garcia, or the other two in the next one. I didn't really remember the names a whole lot, but they came out and they showed, they showed that they definitely belong. They got a finish in the UFC. It was a solid start to a big pay-per-view. So, yeah, definitely a good, quick win for Hector Urbina.
And again, a guy that had a long layoff between the Ultimate Fighter and this fight, to go in there, get a win, get a finish, of Mexican descent there in Mexico. Really nice story there for Hector Urbina.
Yep.
Next fight, Augusto Montano took on Chris Heatherly, and Heatherly known as the Stump. And Dave, he's a tough guy. He is called the Stump for a reason, but I think this fight proved that he can't be in the welterweight division anymore. The guys there are just too long and too lanky for him. I mean, he had to fight Ben Saunders, and that guy's 6'3". Now he had to fight, Dodger Montano, who's I believe is 6'6'1", and he just couldn't really get inside against this guy as he got outstruck 32-10. He was trying to push for the takedown. One of three, wasn't really able to do much in that category, and he's trying to get inside, swing the overhand right, but he really wasn't able to. And just that clinch game with his knees and his length and his length with his legs more so than there, just Heatherly couldn't deal with that. And his UFC debut on a main card, highly touted prospect coming out of Mexico, and he was able to go in there and deliver. And Montano's a guy to look out for, moving forward with the welterweight division. But for Heatherly, if he wants to have a successful career in the UFC, he's going to have to drop down a division because these guys are just, too tall for him to deal with.
Yeah, Montano, we were watching the fight here, and, at 170 pounds, the way he's built is very tricky, I think. It's a very tricky build. He's not, I think he's taller, and guys like, I'm clicking on him real quick here. He's 6'2". Like, I know Brian is 6 foot, and, he's not a huge welterweight by any stretch. But just the way that he's built and, with his, the game plan that he uses, he's just a very tricky guy. Can he stick around at 170 and be a champion? I'm not sure. But, can he stick around at 170 and pose some very tricky matchups for quite a few people at 170? I definitely believe so.
Yeah, like I said, he's definitely a guy to look out for. With his height and pretty good finishing skills, he's definitely a guy to look out for.
And he's got sick hair.
Yeah, that too. The next fight of the evening was in the featherweight division as Ricardo Lamas took on Dennis Bermudez, and pretty close fight for the 3 minutes that it lasted until Lamas was able to land a very nice, stiff left jab that I think completely caught Bermudez off guard. That dropped him to the ground, and kind of in that ensuing scramble, Lamas was able to lock up a guillotine choke and get the tap at 318. And first of all, if anyone got a finish, I would have said Bermudez. If Lamas got a win, I would have said he probably won a decision. But for Lamas not only to get the win over a guy on a roll like Dennis Bermudez, very impressive, and to finish him in the first round, something most people don't equate with Ricardo Lamas, being a finisher. Very big for him moving forward in his step to getting another crack at the UFC 145 title. And for Bermudez, it's not anything that he did like super wrong. He just got dropped from a punch and wasn't able to recover quick enough to stop a submission. And that's not something you can like completely work on, but it's something that he's obviously going to have to maybe try to tighten up his reaction time or head movement a little bit. But I mean, other than that, it was a very close fight. Just Lamas was able to capitalize, on a quick series there, and he got the finish.
Yeah, couple of things. Lamas looks good. I think Lamas, he should be back in the title picture. I would love to see Lamas steamroll somebody like Conor McGregor. Speaking of Conor McGregor, did you notice Bermudez wearing McGregor's company hat on his way to the cage?
He said he put something like, I put my support behind here at McGregor Industries, and I guess he was supporting Dennis, and then he afterwards he's like, well, I was kind of ripping on Lamas. He goes, I hate to see one of my McGregor Incorporated guys lose. He goes, my hat's off to you, Ricardo. So he seemed to kind of gain some respect for Ricardo after the fight. But yeah, I don't know. Conor McGregor's an interesting guy, so I'm not even surprised that he somehow was doing stuff with Dennis. I don't know.
Yeah. I thought Lamas looked great, man. I really did. So.
Yeah, like I said, maybe a fight with McGregor after his bout with Seaver. I would even throw in possibly the loser of Swanson Edgar, or maybe the winner of Oliveira and Jeremy Stevens coming up here in December as possible next opponents.
Those are all good.
Maybe even Nick Lenz. Nick Lenz solid too. All right, we can go on.
Who gives a shit about Nick Lenz?
Nick Lenz. All right, let's co-main event of the evening: Kelvin Gastelum against Jake Ellenberger. Again, we talked about this kind of with the Michael Chandler thing. Something that I think Jake Ellenberger is going to have to go back to the drawing board, just take some months off, and just completely try to work on his game. Because this not quite like the Lamas thing where he got dropped. I think it's a situation, Dave, where he gets taken down at the end of the round. There's 20 to 30 seconds left. He's thinking, all right, he took me down. He's got me in a good position, but he's probably not going to finish me. I don't have to have my guard super up. He's not going to be able to do something here in this amount of time. That's what I'm thinking is running through Jake Ellenberger's head.
Mm-hmm.
And because he let his guard down, Gastelum saw, hey, maybe if I can get the hooks in, maybe I finish it, maybe I don't, but let's try for a choke. Maybe I can get a finish. Saw that opportunity, gets the hooks in, rolls him over, puts in the choke, and gets the finish 14 seconds from the end of the round to get his biggest win of his career and finish Jake Ellenberger. And I honestly think it's as simple as that, as Ellenberger letting his guard down in the final moments of a round, thinking it's about to end, and Gastelum not giving up, going until the final bell of that round, and he got the finish. And like I said, much like Michael Chandler, Ellenberger's got to take some time off and just redo his game, because we're not seeing, at least Ellenberger maybe had a little more form on the stand-up than Chandler, but it's something to where we're not seeing that aggressive nature. We're not seeing output. We're not seeing, the footwork and head movement. We're not seeing that same Jake Ellenberger who had, we're talking about great fights against Carlos Condit and Martin Kampmann and Diego Sanchez, and we're talking about brutal knockouts of Nate Marquardt and Jake Shields. You know what I mean? We saw a guy that was ripping through people, and if he wasn't ripping through them, he was having a war. In the last 3 fights, Dave, we haven't seen that. We've seen a slower-paced Ellenberger. We've seen a guy who doesn't seem to be able to get off or in his strikes or his wrestling, and it just seems like something is not clicking right now for him. And Kelvin Gastelum took full advantage of that, got the victory, and now finds himself in another co-main event spot against Tyron Woodley with maybe a title shot afterwards, Dave, if he gets by Tyron Woodley. I mean, we talk about a complete, a change of fortune between these two fighters.
Jim, I know currently, I'm checking Twitter, and I know a couple of the guys from like the memorabilia and the cards group are watching. They just retweeted the links out, so appreciate that. But I hope I don't either sound dumb or is Kelvin Gastelum, is he top 10 in the world, honestly? Or is he just, he's taking advantage of the circumstances that are in front of him? Because I completely agree that I think that Ellenberger let up at the end of the round, and Gastelum was able to pounce on that by continuing to go. Is that something that everybody does? I think if we called Brian on the phone right now and said, hey, when you know there's 30 seconds left, are you still going 100%? Are you trying to start to catch your breath? I don't know. I don't think anybody's ever going to tell us exactly how it is. But I just don't see Gastelum going in and beating Woodley and beating Condit and beating these guys that are at the top of the division. I just don't see it happening. And I mean, every time he goes in there, he wins, but it's not like, I don't know. It's very hard for me to get a read on Gastelum.
Well, coming into this fight, by the UFC, he was ranked number 11. Obviously, we did not have him that high. I would think top 20, but with Ellenberger, I think we had him in the top 10. I think we had him probably somewhere around 8 or 9, 7 or 8, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in that realm, the lower end of the top 10. Obviously, with this loss and his third loss in a row, he's now out of the top 10 when we do our rankings for December. I feel like that's he got cut?
No, I'm telling you.
I don't know if he'll get cut by the UFC, but he's definitely out of our top 10 rankings. And Gastelum, I'd have to really take a look at the full picture when this month wraps up, but maybe we put him in at number 10, like at 10.
Right. It goes back to me. When Fabricio Verdum fought Mike Russo was on like a 2-fight win streak. If Mike Russo beat Fabricio Verdum, there was nobody in the top 5 that Russo was going to beat. And I feel the same situation is right here. Gastelum might be good, top 10, top 11, top 12, but I don't think there's anybody in the top 5 that he can beat. And all you're doing is setting him up for, what do you do with Gastelum if he loses?
Loses to Woodley?
Yeah.
There's still a lot. Luckily the welterweight division has, I think, the most, or the second most to lightweight, so there's no shortage of guys that he could face. But to me, it's he had to face someone increasingly harder than Jake Ellenberger, though. The next step. He couldn't have fought someone lower than Ellenberger.
Hey, Jim.
So we'll find out if he's for real.
DK follows us on Twitter, and he's part of the Facebook group and stuff like that. He says, I think Gastelum is the new Bermudez. Lots of hype, but this next fight will prove a lot.
I think that's fair. That's a fair statement.
Yep.
And yeah, we're gonna find out if he's for real. I mean, Tyron Woodley. You and I like Tyron Woodley. I mean, yep. This guy's a beast. So we're gonna find out real quickly if he can hang with the big dogs. All right, let's get to the main event of the evening. Fabricio Verdum against Mark Hunt, UFC Interim Heavyweight Championship. And Dave, we know it was an exciting fight. It ended in a finish here in the second round. But I got to say this. One, Mark Hunt was winning this fight up until the knee thrown by Fabricio Verdum. Verdum was not moving in and out. He was not using footwork and head movement. He was not using his great leg kicks. He was not using his range. He was standing flat-footed, letting the guy who take control of the center of the octagon, the great kickboxer Mark Hunt, controlled the pace, allowed a much shorter man to get inside, throw power shots, throw kicks, and really look lost. He was doing nothing to throw Mark Hunt off balance in this fight, and he was really playing into Mark Hunt's game. I mean, when you fight Mark Hunt, Dave, you can't stand flat-footed and let him hit you. Like, that's not a good strategy for winning. What Verdum did do right, though, and I don't know if this is something he picked up on his corner, but he saw that when he was trying for takedowns, Mark Hunt was throwing uppercuts, as that's a great way to defend takedowns. One of the reasons he was successful with takedown defense in that fight. Well, he thought if I kind of maybe fake in a little bit low, maybe pop up with the knee, maybe I can catch him off guard with him trying to counter with an uppercut. And that's exactly what he did. He kind of went low a little bit, came up with the knee. Hunt's already in the process of kind of ducking down to throw that power uppercut. Then all of a sudden realizes he's not going for a takedown. He's trying to knee me in the face. Couldn't recover to put his hands up quick enough. Gets kneed in the face, and then more punches follow to get this thing stopped at the 227 marker. And just that one, that's all it takes in the sport is one instance, and you can go from winning a fight to being finished, and that's what happened to Mark Hunt. If that Fabricio Verdum Dave fought Cain Velasquez, he would have got destroyed. That is a Fabricio Verdum. That's probably the worst Verdum we've seen since his return to the UFC. He was able to find one great counter there, and it got him the finish, and it got him the interim belt. He's going to have to work on some things when he takes on Cain Velasquez, or if he takes on, say, like Junior Dos Santos or Stipe Miocic again. Because if he shows up like he did, against Mark Hunt, against those guys I just mentioned, Stipe, Velasquez, Dos Santos, I don't think he wins.
Yeah, if he has a slow start against Cain, he's going to look like Dos Santos did in the last fight. It's going to be all cut up.
It won't go 25 minutes, I don't think, if he looks that bad.
No. Pretty hard to disagree with what you're saying. Not a lot of times you see a flying knee from a heavyweight, huh? But interim belt for Verdum. Hopefully Cain gets back. I want to see that fight. I don't think Verdum's got the cardio to hang with Cain, but that fight will be it'll be something. I'll tell you that. Hey, let's real quick, just because people are listening live and they're tweeting at me. So just real quick to go back to the co-main event. AJ, you know him as Sny Guy. He says, dude, he's 23. He's not beating a top 5 yet, but give him some slack. DK says, I just said that. Dude is super young and will be great. I'm a big fan and excited for him. I mean, that's true. A lot of people don't realize he is only 23.
He was the youngest person ever to win the Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah.
So, like I said, he had to face someone increasingly better than Woodley, and I think they kind of have brought him along nicely. He fought that melancholy guy, no one's ever heard of, after fighting Uriah Hall. He fights kind of an established, long-time veteran gatekeeper in the sport, Rick Story. Had a great fight with him. I forget he had another fight after that. Wasn't as big a name. Oh, the Nico Muski, a rising prospect much like himself, finishes him. Then 3 wins in a row, coupled with his Ultimate Fighter win, 4, give him that next bump up in competition. Jake Ellenberger finishes him in the first round. Now he's taking on Tyron Woodley, a top 5 guy. So his progression has been right. It's not like he's been thrown to the wolves, from day one. This is the next evolution, and we'll see whether or not he's ready for the big time now, or if it's still going to be a few years.
Sweet.
Real quickly on the co-main event, they announced that Cain Velasquez would be set to return in June of next year, which is about 8 months from now. Obviously, it looks as though Fabricio Verdum is going to wait all this time. Now, you and I are under the impression that if you have an interim belt and the champion's not ready, and to me, that's a long time, 8 months. We're getting close to a year there. Verdum probably would want to fight in that time period before June. Honestly, how do you like in March we see either Verdum, Hunt 2, or heck, Andrei Arlovski's kind of on a winning streak. He beat Verdum a couple of years ago. Why don't we throw like Andrei Arlovski or someone else, somebody in there in March, and then have the unification bout in June? I really don't like Verdum sitting for 8 months. That's another 8 months. Nobody else is getting a shot at the heavyweight title.
I think the biggest problem with him defending is the fact that like you have the Miocic Dos Santos fight coming. You have some of those fights that are kind of like that Miocic Dos Santos fight is like a week or two before Christmas, right?
Yeah, that's the 13th. So, yeah, you're telling that guy he's going to have to wait a whole year for a title shot, whoever wins that.
Well, I mean, I guess it's one of those things where, so let's say that fight ends and that fight's going to be over December 13th. So, for lack of a better term, they'll probably be out till January 15th, with injuries and suspensions and the holidays and stuff like that. So then they could maybe fight March, April timeframe. So, I mean, I think it comes down to a scheduling issue more than anything. I mean, Kane can only come back when Kane can come back,
I get that, but to have, obviously that fight's going to happen. So that means if JDS wins, again, great case for a title shot, much like Miocic. But if he's going to have to, either of those guys going to have to take another fight to then hopefully fight the winner of Verdum and Velasquez in June, we're talking October before either of those two guys get a crack.
Yeah, not the best situation to be a good heavyweight, huh?
Yeah, I mean,
not a good situation to be a good heavyweight in a not loaded heavyweight division.
I mean, you have him as the interim champ. If you wanted him to be the champ, you should try to make him defend it. Otherwise, that fight should have just been a 5-round main event and should not have been for an interim title.
Right.
So we'll see if that stance changes. Again, we have time. Verdum would be ready to go. Again, like I said, Hunt would probably be ready to go. Like I said, heck, throw someone like Arlovski out there. That'll garner some attention. You know what I mean? There's guys out there you can make a quick fight with, or throw JDS and Stipe, the winner of that in there in March.
Yep.
And let's not get this wrong. There's a very good chance that Kane or he gets hurt again with a different injury.
Or John Jones moves up to heavyweight.
There you go. Throw that in March. All right. All right. Let's get to our final segment here on the show. UFC Fight Night Austin. Frankie Edgar versus Cub Swanson. 6 fights on the main card, Dave, this Saturday night for Fox Sports 1. First fight of the evening at 155 pounds as Isaac Valley Flag will take on Matt Wiman. Looking at Ike there, of his 14 career victories, he has 6 decisions. So far in the UFC, just 1-2, riding a 2-fight losing streak. His last fight was a loss to Takanori Gomi back at UFC 172. And looking at his opponent, Matt Wiman, he has been fighting in the UFC, Dave, a very long time, since 2006. He is able to put together 9 wins against 5 losses. However, his last fight was all the way back in January of 2013, where he got knocked out by TJ Grant at UFC on Fox 6. And of his 15 career victories, 6 are by decision. So Matt Wiman, he's been out for a while. I haven't really heard, he had a nice, Dave, between 2009 and 2012, he had won 5 out of 6 fights, being the likes of Matt Danzig twice, as well as at that time the up-and-coming Brit Paul Sass, and his only loss was a unanimous decision loss to Dennis Seaver. He had a nice little streak there. He gets knocked out by TJ Grant, and I thought he retired. I mean, it's like he completely kind of dropped off the face of the earth there. But if we see the Matt Wiman that was kind of on that 6-fight streak I was talking about, we're going to see a guy who has pretty aggressive stand-up, good submission skills, pretty all-around good fighter and a tough guy, but I don't know what to kind of expect from him against, coming off that long a layoff. I mean, we're almost talking about a 2-year layoff, Dave. That's a long time to be away from the sport. And you're taking a guy, Isaac Valley Flag, a veteran of the sport, 36 years old, 20 professional fights to his credit. Maybe not the biggest name, but I tell you what, it's a guy that's going to go in there and he's going to give you a fight. I mean, he's not an easy out. Um, and maybe not an interesting fight to the main card, but I think if Matt Wyman can kind of show that guy we saw in that win streak there from what did I say, 2009 to 2012 against a tough warrior like Ike, I think we got makings of a pretty good fight. But again, it depends what we see out of Matt Wyman. I mean, 2 years, almost 2 years, that's a long time.
Yeah, that's a hefty layoff to come right back onto the pay-per-view main card. Not a pay-per-view. Fox
Any
Sports
main card,
1.
right?
Any main card, yeah. I do remember Matt Wyman from a couple years ago when he was on like the Troop show. Maybe it was a Troop show, maybe it was a Fox show, but he came out and he didn't have a banner. He had one cornerman, no banner, nothing on his shorts, and there was some sort of talk about he was like, hey, the times are tough for MMA fighters. I can't get anybody to sponsor me. I remember something about that happening. But this is going to be a real gritty fight between two guys who are they're not afraid of the big time lights of Fox Sports 1 or cable. So this will be a good start to the main card of the show. But I think it'll be, like I said, a gritty fight. But to think it's going to be a super technical bout with lots of groundwork and precision striking, I think would be silly.
No, this is going to be a fun fight for sure. And real quickly, before we get to the next fight, I want to mention Yves Edwards, longtime veteran of the sport, former #1 overall in the division of 155. He had a quote saying that he feels like he was training for his last fight for this fight camp as he takes on Akbar Ariola, if I said that correctly. So if you get a chance to tune into the undercard, you may see the last time one of the true pioneers of the sport, especially in the lighter weight classes, fight. So definitely tune in to the prelims. Also, because we got to interview, if you haven't listened to it already, Paige Van Zant. She will be making her UFC debut against Kaylin Curran, 115-pound female strawweight division. She will be fighting Kaylin Curran there on the undercard. So a couple of reasons to tune in to that undercard. And you haven't, again, check out that interview. It was great having her on, and wish her the best of luck against Kaylin this Saturday. The next fight of the evening is at flyweight, as former flyweight title contender Joseph Benavidez will take on Dustin Ortiz. Looking at Benavidez, 7-2 so far in the UFC. His only 2 losses to Mighty Mouse Johnson. His last fight was a victory over Tim Elliott back at UFC 172, and of his 20 career victories, he has 9 submission victories. Looking at Dustin Ortiz, the prospect coming out of that, as of right now, Dave, that much maligned Rufus Sport camp, 3-1 so far in the UFC, currently riding a 2-fight win streak. His last fight was a victory over Justin Scoggins at the Tough 19 finale, and of his 14 career victories, he has 5 knockouts. This is a fight, Dave, where we get to see one of the young up-and-coming guys here in the flyweight division, and Dustin Ortiz against kind of one of the stalwarts, the clear-cut #2 guy in this division against Joseph Benavidez. And we're going to see whether Ortiz is real or not. And to me, the difference in this fight is if the fight stays standing, which I think it very well, I think Benavidez has very good takedown defense. Will Ortiz have enough tools in his stand-up to deal with Joseph Benavidez? As of right now, we haven't really seen that because he's been primarily one-dimensional with his wrestling. And you can't be one-dimensional against Joseph Benavidez. He's good. He's too good in too many areas to attack him with just wrestling. And to me, that's what we're going to see is kind of that one-dimensional style. Is that going to be enough to beat a guy like Joseph Benavidez?
Yeah. You ever feel like for these guys in the top, like Benavidez, these guys that are the clear-cut top of the heap, you ever feel like he's out there and it's just kind of like, I'm trying to think of a real good analogy here, but it's almost like he's like taking batting practice where these guys keep coming at him, and his job is to basically just like fend them off. because he's the number 2 guy in the division. And it's just, as long as he sticks with his game plan, Joe B I'm talking about, as long as he sticks with what he knows, there's probably nobody coming up that's going to beat him. You know, maybe Dodson gives him a run for his money. Maybe there's a couple of guys, but there's not. I don't think the number 13 guy has a chance to beat the number 2 guy in this fight.
The next fight of the evening will be in the heavyweight division, as Jared Rosholt will take on Alexei Olenek. Looking at Jared Rosholt, 3-0 in the UFC, and overall he is riding a 7-fight winning streak. Of his 11 career victories, he has 6 finishes with 3 knockouts and 3 submissions, and his last fight was a victory over the Hulk Solopalele at Fight Night New Zealand in June of 2014. Looking at his opponent, Alexei Olenek, finally, Dave, after over 50 professional fights and fighting everywhere but the UFC, he made his long-awaited UFC debut back at Fight Night Albuquerque, Swanson against Stevens against Anthony Hamilton, where he was able to win by submission in the very first round. Of his 49 career victories, Dave, he has 40 submission victories. I don't know if that's a record somewhere, but that's a lot. And looking at this matchup, we're going to see, obviously, the wrestling of Rosholt, I think, on display against the submission prowess of Olenek. And I fully expect Rosholt to be on top and Olenek to be on bottom, and we're going to see, you know, whose grappling style can play out. I don't see a lot of striking between the two, but this should be fun. You know, Rosholt, I think, proved in that fight against Palele, he has his wrestling obviously was good, but taking out a guy the size of the Hulk and, you know, his grappling ability, I think, opened a lot of people's eyes to how good Rosholt really is. And, you know, he's taken a guy, a veteran of the sport, like I said, 49-9 in his career with 40 submission victories. This is a nice test for a guy who's, you know, trying to be kind of the next big thing here in the heavyweight division. And, you know, for Alexei, you know, he's getting a shot, you know, on a main card, and he's a crafty veteran, and I think it's going to be a fun fight. I think this is going to be a kind of a sneaky fight in here with some of the other guys. You know, most people may have not heard of either of these two gentlemen, but I think we're going to see a very intriguing grappling match here.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to pick somebody to win this fight via standing knockout. Seems legit, right?
Right.
Yeah. This is another fight where, to me, this is one of those cards, Jim, where everybody's complaining, you know, that there's too many cards. This is going to be a fun fight. Is this going to lead to a title shot? No. But stylistically, this should be at least an entertaining fight, and it's heavyweights. One of these guys could fall down with one jab. So, you know, definitely worth watching. So, but I'm definitely, when I make my pick, I'm going to pick somebody to win this fight via standing knockout. 100% truth.
The next fight of the evening, I believe, Dave, will be at 125 pounds, as Brad Pickett will take on Chico Camus. Looking at Brad Pickett, 4-4 so far in the UFC, 1-1 since dropping down to flyweight from bantamweight. In his last fight, he lost to Ian McCall at the Fight Night in Dublin back in July, and of his 24 career victories, 10 are by submission. Looking at Chico Camus, he will be making his flyweight debut. So far in the UFC, a record of 3-2. His last fight was a loss to Chris Holdsworth back at UFC 173, and of his 14 career victories, 7 are by decision. Now, this should be a fun fight. Chico Camus, very entertaining guy, very good stand-up guy, a lot of power. It'll be interesting to see how he handles the weight cut down to bantamweight, and to still see if his power that was there at 135 is there at 125. And for Brad Pickett, this is a guy so far, I don't think he's figured out that weight cut completely, Dave, at 125. He has not looked really good in either of his two fights at 125. It just doesn't seem like that output that we're normally used to seeing at 135 is there, and it seems like he's really relying on kind of a wrestling base, more of a grinding out style, and that's not, to me, Brad Pickett. It's throwing punches and bunches and getting your opponent's face, dropping them, and then getting a submission. That's kind of typically how Brad Pickett works. And I don't know if we're going to see that same one-punch Pickett again. I'd like to, because I think he's a guy that can do some things in this division. He does hold a win over Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. So if he ever can get on a roll, Dave, I think he's almost guaranteed to get a title shot at some point. But he has to try to put it all together. And if he can put it together, there's no doubt in my mind that he could beat Chico Camus. But if we see that same kind of, drawn out, tired, from the weight cut Pickett, again, Camus, we'll see whether he's drawn out or not, but if Camus can come in with that same level of aggressiveness that he's accustomed to, very easily we could see a upset happen here.
Yeah, it just goes to show you, Brad Pickett's a perfect example of that weight cut. He did have the one-punch power at 135 pounds, but he's definitely a contender at 125, but he's got to be able to get there in a safe manner that allows him to bring his strength, his cardio, his entire game with him at 125 pounds. Limping to the stage at 126 pounds, with zero energy and, a devastating weight cut, that doesn't help anybody.
Let's get to the next fight of the evening. It will be the co-main event at 155 pounds as Edson Barboza will take on the King, Bobby Green. Looking at Bobby Green, 4-0 so far in the UFC, and overall he is riding a 8-fight win streak. Has not lost since 2011, which was a split decision to Jay-Z Cavalcante back in Strikeforce. His last fight was a victory over Josh Thompson at UFC on Fox 12, and of his 23 career victories, he has 9 submission wins. Looking at Barboza, so far in the UFC, he is able to compile a record of 8-2. His last fight was a victory over Evan Dunham back at UFC Fight Night Atlantic City in July of this year, and of his 14 career victories, 10 are by knockout. Dave, this is a very intriguing fight here in the lightweight division. We have Barboza, knocking on the door there of the top 10. Of course, we have Bobby Green firmly in the top 10 after his victory over Josh Thompson earlier this year. But this is a fight, Dave, where I think Bobby Green, who we've normally so far in his Strikeforce and UFC tenure has really just used his stand-up, kind of a brawling style, a guy that can get in, get out, keeps his hands down, he's fun, he's entertaining. But I think he's going to have to try to tie up Edson Barboza, because I don't think you want to stand at range with this guy.
No.
You don't. And Green, a guy, like we said, likes to keep his hands down. He has to keep his hands up. You can't give Barboza, opportunities like that. I know he's pretty good moving his head out there, but Barboza's a guy you just don't want to toy with. You know what I mean? You can't mess around with this guy because he'll hit you with something and you're going to be on the canvas. His only 2 losses are, one, he got, caught off guard after knocking Cerrone down, gets submitted, and, he just got, I hate to say off guard, I guess you could say he kind of got thrown off guard by Jamie Varner there. But this is a fight where you got to tie in, you got to get in close, and you got to cut the distance. You can't stand at range with Edson Barboza. And if Bobby Green keeps his hands down, Dave, I think sooner or later Barboza's going to hit him with something. I think Green is more in danger of getting finished than Barboza is, and I think Green has to be on his A game to not get finished by Edson Barboza.
Yeah, the dirtier the fight is, the better it's going to be for Bobby Green. You can't let Barboza can't be at range. If he is, he's going to pick people apart. I like Bobby Green. He's a gamer. I'm sure his camp is smart enough to realize that he's got to get inside if he wants to be successful in this co-main event.
All right, let's get to the main event of the evening at 145 pounds. Frankie Edgar, former UFC lightweight champion, against Cub Swanson. Looking so far at Frankie Edgar at 145 pounds, he is 2-1, and His last fight was a victory over BJ Penn at the Ultimate Fighter 19 finale. And of his 17 career victories, he has 9 decision victories. And looking at his opponent, Cub Swanson, he is currently riding a very impressive 6-fight winning streak. He is also 6-1 in the UFC. His most recent victory, he defeated Jeremy Stevens at the Fight Night, which he headlined back in June of this year. And of his 21 career victories, he has 8 knockouts. Now, Dana White has already come out and said that if Cub Swanson can beat Frankie Edgar, he will get a shot at Jose Aldo for the UFC 145 title. Now, headlining, again, not new for Cub Swanson. This will be the second time in a row he hasn't done that, so that shouldn't faze him too much. Going 5 rounds shouldn't faze him. But maybe now the added pressure of, yeah, if you win, you get a title shot. Well, that weigh heavily on his mind. Number 2, he's facing the best opponent he's ever had to face, I think, in Cub Swanson is facing in Frankie Edgar. We're talking about a former world champion. We're talking about a guy that has conditioning for days, heart, maybe some of the best footwork and head movement in any division, and just a tough guy to, first of all, hit and keep down. Tremendous takedown defense and also pretty good wrestling offense as well. And ever since he's kind of been in the UFC, he's slowly but surely, working with Renzo Gracie and Ricardo Mena, shoring up his jiu-jitsu game. So it may not show in his record, but he has pretty solid submissions as well. So if this fight stays standing, I would say Swanson has more power, knockout power, but I still think Frankie Edgar, his technique is second to none. That's going to be something we'll see if Swanson can handle, if he can handle that speed, pressure, footwork, and head movement of Edgar. The X factor is whether or not Edgar tries to take this thing to the ground. Now, Swanson has a pretty good jiu-jitsu background, but like I said, Frankie's been ever so slowly learning his jiu-jitsu game. I don't know if he has a black belt, but he's probably pretty high up there now with Renzo and Almeida. Definitely a tough guy to try to submit. And if Edgar can get on top, that's going to be really hard for Swanson to deal with. And it's just whether or not Frankie wants to try that. So that's kind of the X factor, is whether or not Edgar tries to take this thing to the ground, and if he does, can Swanson stop the takedown? Can he keep a fight standing where he has more of a puncher's chance to win this fight? But it should be a fun fight, a great main event, and Cub Swanson is more than deserving for a shot at the title if he beats Frankie Edgar.
Yeah, I don't think this fight's going to end via finish. I think this is going to be a very stylistic matchup where there's going to be a lot of ebb and flow back and forth in this fight. Frankie's going to try this, and Cub's going to do his best to defend it, and then it's going to go back and forth. Might not be the greatest main event on Fox Sports 1 in their history, the most exciting, but I think it's definitely going to be an awesome fight for those who understand the sport the way it's meant to be digested, I guess. But if Cub can walk out victorious, or limp out victorious, or crawl out, or get carried out victorious in this fight, I definitely think he's 100% in line for the title shot.
With that said, Dave, let's get to some picks here for UFC Fight Night Austin, starting with the first fight on the main card, Isaac Valley Flag against Matt Wyman at lightweight. If there wasn't such a long layoff day for Matt Wyman, I probably would no doubt pick him, but I'm not sure what we're going to see from him with almost a 2-year layoff, so give me Ike for the victory in this one.
Yeah, I'll take Ike as well. The layoff is what bothers me.
At flyweight, Joseph Benavidez against Dustin Ortiz. Dustin Ortiz is a great prospect, definitely a guy who has a future in this division, but I don't think right now he has the tools to beat a guy the caliber of Joseph Benavidez, so give me a Joe B. Jiu-Jitsu for the win.
I'll take Jiu-Jitsu for the win as well.
At heavyweight, Jared Rosholt against Alexei Olenek. Again, this should be a very intriguing fight with the wrestling background of Rosholt and the submission background of Olenek, but Rosholt's a big dude, very big dude, and Olenek's not like he's a light guy, but he's not a massive heavyweight by any means, and how will he deal with the size and the wrestling ability of Rosholt? That's intriguing to me, but Rosholt's kind of on a roll right now, so I'm going to go with the Big Show, as he's known, Jared Rosholt.
Jared Rosholt, second round knockout. Write it down.
Also at flyweight, Brad Pickett against Chico Camus. What Brad Pickett are we going to see? And, how is also Camus going to handle, his first weight cut down to flyweight? Very intriguing fight, but even though he hasn't looked the best, Dave, he has done it a few more times. I'm going to take the Brit Brad Pickett here against Chico Camus.
Yeah, I got to go with Pickett as well. Hopefully Camus makes that weight cut well, and he can be a force at 125, but not knowing how that weight cut's going to be is going to be, it's tricky to bet against him or bet him.
Co-main events of the evening at 155 pounds, Bobby Green against Edson Barboza. I really like both guys. They're both entertaining, but I'm going to go with Edson Barboza in this one. I think Bobby Green with kind of the hands down a lot, I think that really plays into what Barboza, likes to do with his explosive power, and we'll see what Bobby Green does to counter, but I'm going to take Edson Barboza in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Barboza. Bobby Green's he's got to have pretty much a perfect fight, I think, to beat Barboza. Just, he's got to have his hands up the whole time, and I just don't know. At some point, there's going to be an opening for Barboza.
Main event of the evening, Frankie Edgar against Cub Swanson in the featherweight division. Very close fight. It's definitely a fight that Cub Swanson, I think, needs to get to the next level and prove that he's on championship level, and Frankie Edgar's the guy to test yourself against. But with that said, even though the winning streak he's been on, Frankie Edgar is incredible. I don't think he's had a bad performance in a very long time, and I don't see that here against Cub Swanson. Much like the Green stuff, Swanson has to be perfect to beat Frankie Edgar, whereas I don't think Frankie Edgar has to be perfect to beat Cub Swanson. And that's the difference. And I think that's the difference in the matchup. So give me the former champ, the answer to win this one.
Yeah, I think Cub Swanson can win this fight, but I'm going to go with Frankie. I just think he's kind of got that championship pedigree, and I mean, we got to see somebody bring the fight to him and beat him, and I just don't see it happening with Cub Swanson. So give me Frankie the answer, Edgar. Is he on my wall behind me?
Well, he might be on your wall somewhere, but I don't think he's directly behind you.
I feel like he should be.
Well, you have to do some rearranging.
Oh, Joe B is, though.
Oh, there you go.
Right there.
All right, well, before we end the broadcast, a couple of thanks that we haven't mentioned already. Of course, let's mention our friends at MMAinsider.net, Chuck Grace. If you haven't been there, they kind of retooled their website, a little bit. It's a kind of a nice, fresh look. I like it. So if you haven't checked it out already, MMAinsider.net. It has all the latest, results and updates from this past weekend, and nice looking website as well. And even redid our Beyond the Cage section of the site too, so it looks really awesome. So great job on Chuck retooling the website there.
What?
Ryan Pickup at MMAforlife.ca. Follow him on Twitter at _MMA for life. And we got to give him a shout out because if you haven't seen on our Facebook page already, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage, Ryan was first place for UFC 180, and he won our overall grand prize of the signed glove from Eddie Wineland and the signed glove and photo of Eddie Wineland. Of course, we also had, I believe it was Jeff Jensen, got the Varner signed glove. We had, I think Andrew Sanford won one of the mystery packs of cards, and then we had, the name's escaping me there on the last prize winner. But anyways, all four prize winners got contacted and they won. It was a great contest. I hope everybody had fun that signed up and played, and I think people like that counter move, Dave. So I think maybe for our next contest, we're definitely going to run at least one more here before the end of the year. I think we may do that again.
The
a lot of people like that.
The bank was third place, and then Andrew was fourth place.
Oh, that was why am I forgetting his name? The bank knows who he is. I think it was Matthew.
Was it the bank?
Yeah, he won one of the mystery packs. I think it was just the bank won altogether.
How about the blood bank?
Oh, that's what he should be. You should rethink that. All right. All right.
Hey,
So
what place did Steve Sadler get?
Steve said, did he join?
Yeah.
By
By default, we'll give him last place.
You're putting me on the spot here. Let me see if I can. No, he definitely. I don't think he was last place. Let me double check here. Let's see. He was. See if I can find his username. Do you know his username? Oh, was it SWS33? Was that probably him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Well, he
him.
was second to last place. He was in 16th place with 190 points. So.
Ouch. Did you hear that, Steve? I wonder how that happened.
So contest, of course, our friends of Bluegrass MMA covering the local scene here in the Midwest, bluegrassmma.com, and of course our fantastic presenting sponsors of Fight Chicks, and again check out their great line of gear at fightchicks.com. Anything else to add, Dave?
Hey, Steve, I'm sending you this for your 16th place. It's the Big Boss Man and Akeem, the African Dream from WWF. This will be sent out immediately.
Oh, man. All right, well, he is the Juice, Dave Sadler. Follow him on Twitter at VigilanteJuice. I'm your host, Jim Graham. Follow me on Twitter, just my name, at Jim Graham. For Dave Sadler, I am Jim Graham. Thank you for listening to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks.